Righty, welcome to all of our wonderful guests. We're going to get started in just a second. I am really excited for us to chat today. We have two incredible presenters. I am not one of them. And they have a lot of really great stuff to share with us about ways that we can use video and make sure that it's effective. In just a second, we, the presenters, will introduce ourselves, but if those of you in attendance wouldn't mind dropping who you are and maybe where you're joining us from in the chat box, that would be awesome. As we are seeing those intros come in, I just want to, again, thank you guys for coming. We're really excited about all of the cool stuff we're going to share with you today. Today's topic, as you probably know since you signed up for this webinar, is elevating the summer learning experience. We're going to talk about sort of closing out this school year really successfully, how we can make summer learning exciting, engaging, successful, and then some of the ways that we can start to prepare for next year, which I'm sure folks probably are not quite ready to start thinking about, but we're going to just spend a couple of seconds on that as well. So let's go ahead and start with some introductions, just so you guys know who we are. Hey, Katie. I am Olivia Nelson. I work at Screencastify. I'm the head of professional development. And before I came to Screencastify, I was an educator for about a decade. If you've ever been in a session with me before, you've heard me say I've taught tons of grades and subjects, but third grade math is really where my heart is. So if I had to choose to tell you something, I would say that that's what I taught. I'll kick it over to you, Tony Rose, to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia. Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Rose, Deanna, and she, they pronouns. I am the Community Engagement Manager for Modern Classrooms Project. And I'm a former middle school English teacher, so I taught for about 10 years. I did high school journalism as well and adult ESL. And I just love anything and everything that deals with education. So I'm really excited to be in this space.
And hello, everybody. My name is George Oma. I'm currently the Associate Director of Professional Learning at Digital Promise. Before I started working there, I was a teacher and administrator at middle school in New York City, where I am based. And so my subject is math all the way. My grade level, fifth grade, is my fave, my jam. And so, yeah, that's me.
Awesome. I am outnumbered by the middle school folks, but at least I got someone on my math team there. So I wanted to go ahead and jump right into our conversation today. I want to start by talking about kind of how we can close out this school year, right? Students have done a lot of learning, teachers have done a lot of teaching. And so I'm curious about maybe at this point in the year, how we can use video to kind of assess all of the things that we've taught and learned. So I guess we'll start with you, Tony Rose, if you have any ideas, thoughts about some of the ways that we can use video.
Yeah, so as some of you probably feel the same way as I did, presentations were interesting to say the least, right? And so when you have the students present in front of the classroom, it's a lot of pausing, it's a lot of fumbling, it's a lot of waiting. And so as a teacher, I just like absolutely despised it. And I understand that presentation skills are really important. So really taking that time to teach those presentation skills. However, what I did with my students was that I used Screencastify to actually get my students to talk about their learning. And so it was group work. There were 4 students in each group, and every student had a role. And so one would be the one who's doing the screen recording, the other one would write the script, another one would create the slides. And so it was really ultimately a group effort. And the requirement was that their video had to be no longer than 4 minutes long. Y'all, when I told you that it was 4 minutes, it didn't take 15 minutes. It didn't take 6 minutes. There weren't any awkward pauses. My students literally just introduced what their topic was about and what they were going to do. And then it gave my students really the ability to be creative on how they presented. So some students had great editing skills. Some students acted it out. I mean, they were doing some really cool stuff with Screencastify. And I just enjoyed it. And then, of course, students were able to really shine. And so I really, really loved using Screencastify and just the recording aspect of it for students to really gather and organize their thoughts and present it in a way where they're not having to be in front of the class. And so if we're thinking about students who are introverts, students who are just really shy, students who don't have a loud voice, then we're not straining to hear them, we're not getting distracted, we're not getting frustrated as the audience. And so overall, it was just a great idea on my end. I don't even know how I came up with it, but I was just like, we're going to do something different. And the wild thing was, I just told them, you know what, you're going to take a day to explore Screencastify just so that everyone gets a chance to just practice what the platform was about. And our students are really great at just getting it right. So they were even, providing some features that I didn't know about, and so they just really loved it and I loved it, and so it was just a great experience overall. So I would highly suggest utilizing videos instead of real live.
I love that idea. And I think sometimes we're like a little shy to talk about how we feel as teachers listening to presentations, not just how the students feel. And so I really appreciate your honesty and transparency in how it made it easier and better for both you as the teacher and for the students. George, when you and I talked about kind of end of year video uses, you had some really, really cool ways that you had seen some teachers and other folks use video as end of year projects. I was wondering if you could share with our audience a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
a lot of teachers I work with, and I have worked with in the past, use video as a means to demonstrate student mastery. And so I see this a lot more toward the end of the year because teachers feel that they can be a lot more creative toward the end of the year because testing's behind them, like the pressure is kind of off. But I have been encouraging to use this as a medium for the duration of the year because it fosters flexibility in the way students can show their understanding. One example that sticks out in my mind was a seventh grade history project from last year. I believe they were studying ancient civilizations. And they had an essay prompt that they had the choice to either respond in the essay or they could respond through some multimedia medium. And so some students chose to record a video of themselves as newscasters in that time period, informing their audience of what was going on, what the conflict was, and really hitting those points of the standard that the teacher was trying to elicit. Other students made stick figure animations to illustrate their understanding and then kind of stitch them together. And then others use a coding platform to like called Scratch to create like different scenes and then record those and then stitch those together to illustrate their mastery. And so it was just like many paths to one place and like multimodal learning just like exemplified in that example.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of those. I think they're really awesome, kind of concrete ideas. Those of you in the audience, I'm going to just drop, we actually have a student choice board that we created. So if you're interested in giving students choices, there are some ways in there that you can add some of that to, the things that you guys are doing with your students at the end of the year. Thank you again, guys, for sharing that. So in addition to kind of thinking through the assessment piece, which I know is on a lot of our minds all of the time for better or worse, I want to also kind of take a second and think about celebrating at the end of the year, right? I think assessing is something we do and we have to kind of understand where students are academically, but I think we would be so kind of wrong not to celebrate everything that's gone on during the year. And so George, I'm sorry, but I'm going to kick it over to you again, and just to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in terms of celebrating kind of students at the end of a school year. I think you're muted.
I knew that was going to happen at some point. And well, this example that I'm about to say isn't necessarily celebrating academics, but celebrating the students themselves. I used to work in a middle school that was K-8. When our eighth graders were about to graduate, the eighth graders always get like a yearbook, like a good going away hurrah. But in addition to that yearbook, we also reached out to their past teachers, both those that were still like in the lower grade building and also those that had moved on, to kind of record a video message giving kids advice and well wishes for high school, and then kind of compile those videos together to do like a goodbye and good luck for them to kind of take and keep with them to have something to look back at. It was something that we played pieces of during graduation, and the kids like really appreciated being, shout out by name, shout out by class, having certain memories, kind of like articulated by teachers that they had X amount of years ago. And so it was very touchy feely and very tears by eighth graders.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you reminding us that academics are not the only thing to celebrate. Students are whole humans, and there's certainly lots to be celebrated besides just the things that they can do academically. So thanks for that reminder. Check this out, y'all. I just put a quick GIF here about how, of course, I'm going to plug Screencastify Edit, how you can use Screencastify Edit to kind of compile those. George mentioned putting some videos together. There are a bunch of different teachers from different grades. And so obviously a little biased, but I think Screencastify Edit is a really good way to easily get those videos all in one place. All right, so we've talked about assessing at the end of the year. We've talked about celebrating at the end of the year. Now, kind of the meat and potatoes of what we came to talk about today is thinking about summer learning, right? And so we obviously send our students off for the summer. Some of us may work in the summer in terms of summer school or other things, but in a lot of cases, students are sort of on their own, and we don't want them to kind of stop learning just because they're not in a quote unquote traditional classroom over the summer. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can use video to make that summer learning more engaging. Specifically, Tony Rose, I know that I, as a teacher, gave out packets like it was nobody's business when it was summertime. I was like, here's a packet, do the whole thing, have a blast, right? And when you and I talked previously, you had some really good and helpful thoughts there about like, how can these packets be a little bit more useful instead of just kind of putting them in the student's backpack and saying goodbye? So I'd love if you could tell our folks about that.
Yeah, it's funny because I think everyone does packets, right? And now it's just been digitized more than like actual paper. And so one way that I use video to make it a little bit more personable is that creating a video to introduce who I am as a teacher as well as the directions. Because let's be honest, people don't read directions. And so we want to keep it as concise as possible. And even with the videos, it's really nice to go through and just kind of say, like, hey, this is what we're doing, these are the expectations, and this is how you're going to do it. So it's just a brief 1-2 minute video of how to do the packet or just directions. Another thing that I would highly suggest is creating a video specifically for caregivers, just so that they know as well how to support their students. So maybe providing some guided questions throughout the summer packet, just to kind of keep those conversations going. So as an educator, I was all about having the learners do more work than me as a teacher. And so I always ask, well, what can I do that doesn't mean that there's a lot of work for me and a lot of work for my students? And meaning it's intentional, right? It's not just busy work, but really like trying to figure out how can I really have our students practice what their skills are and continuing to practice the skills, and also just like previewing what kind of skills they needed for the following year, right? So for example, the packets that I created were for my upcoming sixth graders that I've never met before. And so as George was talking about, the choice board is really important. We love choice, even as an adult, right? We love choice. And so providing a choice board for students to showcase their learning is really important. And so having the videos, when I did the novel, right, we had like a summer reading packet. And so allowing for students to, instead of writing, right, they recorded a video of themselves responding to a prompt. And so that in itself is really important, because then as an educator, I could just go for a walk and listen to these videos or watch the videos as I'm doing laundry or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be where I have all of my attention on as far as like writing assessments go, right? And in actuality, students are still writing. That's just not what they're giving to you. They're giving you the video, the last part of it all, right? And so utilizing the video to give students different ways of showing their masteries before is really important. And another way too that I would really like to say is that with the video, students are now figuring out how to utilize and how to utilize digital tools, right? And so it's really a great way for them to also say like, oh, in sixth grade, we're going to be using videos a lot. And so getting them to practice those skills already in the summer is really important. But also knowing that as an educator, you have to provide those guidelines, right? Like, hey, these are the things that we have to do. These are the things that we need to do. And then these are the things like kind of like a must do, should do, aspire to do lesson classification, but just understanding that all students know the basic expectations and guidelines.
Man, you have said so much helpful stuff there. A couple things that I want to pull out is I think we keep talking about student choice, and I think it's incredible just to keep reminding ourselves and each other that giving students options, particularly over the summer when they're not in school full time, is just such an incredible way to keep them engaged and excited about learning. The other thing that I thought that was really interesting that you said, among many things, is highlighting kind of giving caregivers an outline of what is happening in the packet too, right? Mentioned in the beginning, I'm kind of third grade math girl, and I will tell you, third grade math looks very different than it did for most of the caregivers that I was working with, right? And so being able to say, hey, it's not you, right? It's actually the math itself has changed. The way we teach math has changed, and the expectations that we have of your students in terms of how they engage with math and how they show their work and that kind of thing may not be what you're used to, but don't worry, because I'm here to support you and walk you through it with, like you said, a concise video. So I just thought so much of what you said was so wonderful. And then, George, I was wondering if you had anything to add in terms of kind of making, I liked the idea of like a response for summer reading, and if you had any other thoughts about making those packets or any of the summer assignments interactive and exciting with video.
Absolutely. Like a lot came to mind of what I've seen teachers doing, what I've leveraged myself as a former math teacher. As far as like on the ELA end, I've seen teachers record portions of like the read aloud to like one maintain or establish that connection if they're for incoming students, just so that they're getting that like introduction of like, you know, this is our teacher, this is what we're going to be talking about once we get into the classroom. And so like just not necessarily recording the whole book, but just portions of the book that they want students to necessarily to respond to. I've also seen teachers add videos to worksheets by leveraging QR codes, and especially when it comes to like push work for next year, when you're exposing things, concepts to students that they have not necessarily grappled with. Teachers have put QR codes next to the instructions, like Tony said, to kind of explain what needs to be done to students, as well as provide examples or illustrate the work. And especially for math teachers, I did backflips. I've seen math teachers do backflips because of their ability to model problem solving to students with their voice, with their pencil, with the work. And you know, before video recording was like more mainstream, I remember kind of sitting and creating packets and drawing arrows to step 1, step 2, step 3, and like hoping it makes sense to the student, but being able to actually do the work and explain and show exactly what I'm doing. I felt it prepared my students when they were coming in, and also it exposed them to like my style of teaching earlier on before they were even in the classroom.
Yeah, I think that personal touch via video is so important. And I too have done my fair share of arrows and trying to make stuff clear on paper that is much more easily shared via video. Tony Rose, it's funny because I think this is such a great bridge into something that you had shared with me in terms of, okay, so you've made these videos, you've added them to the worksheets, and students still have questions, right? None of us are perfect teachers. That would be awesome, but it just isn't the case. And so I would love if you could share with our audience these ideas that you had about how students could share questions via video over the summer.
Yeah, as we all know, right, there's a screencast submit now, which is really awesome with the questions. I think being able to utilize that as well as a tool where students can engage and basically write out any questions that they have. And this also makes it a little bit more of a community-based thing as well, right? So like students can watch other students' videos, which I think is really beautiful. So then, if for some reason they don't understand something, they can watch another student's video and gain that understanding that way. So again, it's less work on the teachers. And granted, like we really don't want teachers to be working in the summer, but it happens, right? And so teachers or students have the ability to ask those questions, but then also take a look around their other peers' videos to try and figure out like where did I go wrong? Like why am I not understanding this? So maybe I can get it from another peer rather than getting it from a teacher. So then again, it's we're creating this space, this collective space of the teacher is really a facilitator and a guide, but we can all learn from each other as opposed to just expecting to learn from the teacher, if that makes sense. So again, creating this space for students to learn alongside each other, to learn from each other, and to really utilize all the resources before going to the teacher to ask those questions. And I also really like too that George, you were talking about with math, right? I just thought about this. Wouldn't it be great? And I'm sure educators have used this as well, where students are writing out their math problem and then you can really see where it went wrong, right? Instead of trying to figure out, like, how in the world did they get this number? It doesn't even make any sense. But I think with the video where students are screen sharing and they can write things out, you can say, like, oh, this is the step that they missed. So there's that error analysis part as well that you as a teacher could do, but you could also create this community of learning and say like, hey, check out the student's video and let's talk about where the error happened, right? And again, that in itself is a community that you have to build because that could be really shameful for students. But if you word it in a way where we're learning, nobody is perfect. This is something that we do together. Creating that space for students to embrace mistakes, to share mistakes, and to learn.
Yes. Yes, yes to all of the things. Yes. I think also, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when I would ask students to check their work, what that meant often was like, cool, look at the work. Yeah, I checked it and hand it in, right? And that's to no fault of the students necessarily. Authentic work checking is a really difficult process to get a handle on. And so being able to watch your video back before you submit it to the teacher as you work through that problem, you're probably a lot more likely to catch that mistake than you are just kind of like looking at the worksheet and not kind of actually going through the process again. So I think that is all really incredible stuff. For those of you that have not used Submit, I'm going to go ahead and just share the link there so that you can check out Screencastify Submit. It is a great way to be accepting video responses from your students, super seamless and easy. In that vein, let's jump to talking about getting ready for next year. We've talked a lot about closing out this year and bridging the summer gap. And I wanted to just think about some of the ways that I thought, Tony Rose, you shared that Submit could be used kind of to build community in preparation for next year. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts there, I'd love to hear. Well, I'm sure everyone would love to hear them.
It's really funny because as you were saying, let's talk about next year, I really had to catch my eye roll because it's like, oh, we're still trying to survive this year. So I feel you, teachers, I get it. But this is actually one of my favorite things about being a teacher, right? Is that the whole preparation for next school year because we get to really reflect on what has happened and what we can do better. And so one way that I would utilize Screencastify screen recording devices is to really have students introduce names are important. Yeah, it's really important. So knowing how to pronounce a student's name prior to having them in your class is really, really important. And something that I've utilized in my own class, a diverse group of students. And my name is pretty, I don't think my name is And so pronunciation is really important. So you can provide some prompts for students to answer, like, hey, what are you looking forward to in seventh grade or whatever grade they're going to? What are some challenges that you've had? What is one thing that you want your teacher to know? Now, you can make this all private where like you're the only one who can see it, but then you can also create a space where, you know, it's not that deep, right? You could just talk about like, what was the greatest thing about the grade before, or who's your best friend, or whatever it is. And I know that middle schoolers love to talk about themselves. So you just give them that platform and you say, you have a minute and a half to talk about whatever you want to talk about when it comes to you. And they'll fill that gap, right? Majority of the time, they'll get cut off at the end because they're just talking too much. And so this is also a great way for me to just kind of say like, okay, I have this many students who are engaged at this point. I have this many students that I need to start memorizing their names and trying to like create things that'll be culturally relevant for them. And so it's just a great preview for teachers to just be like, oh, this is a group of kids that I have, and I'm so excited that I'm already getting a glimpse of this before even the school year started, right? And the thing is, you can like just wait until like the week of planning for you to watch all these videos if you really wanted to. So you don't even have to touch it during the summer. So again, keeping in mind, right, like less work on you, more work on the learners, because the more learners are talking, the more that they're engaging with the work, the more that it's sticking to them as opposed to us talking at them and they're learning passively. So get your students to do the work. Think about how you can shift it from the teacher doing the work to student doing it.
I absolutely think that's great. And I can't think of a single teacher that I've ever met that will not like the idea of doing less work and the students doing more. And then I just wanted to highlight something pretty quickly about just communicating with caregivers. I think that in addition to starting to form the community with students, you can start to think about making sure that caregivers are feeling heard and as part of a community. I think when you are teaching a class, you're obviously responsible for the students, but a lot of the job of teaching is kind of a co-creation process with caregivers. And so bringing them in right from the start is another cool way that you can engage with video. And then last but certainly not least, and Tony Rose, I'll be honest, I also, as I started to say, let's talk about next year, like I hesitated to even get the words out of my mouth. But I do want to toss it over to George for just a second to think about, how video can actually make preparation for next year easier, right? The whole thing about creating videos is that they're renewable resources. And so we can kind of make our jobs easier starting now.
Right. Like I would definitely encourage all teachers, because it's something I wish I would have encouraged myself in the moment to do, that I found out like in the last couple of years. I would encourage teachers to think about the summer as a time to organize and take inventory of previously created videos. So you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. There was one summer that I did that, and I found that I had made like 3 videos over the course of 3 years, kind of off the same thing, almost saying the same exact thing. And if I would have been able to take inventory, I would have known that I already had that. And Also, as you're plugging away creating these videos, depending on how organized you are, I'm not that person. Um, Inventory videos can take the back burner, and so being able to take stock allows you to see what you have, what needs to be created, and then also where you can beg, borrow, and steal from colleagues who also leverage video creation. Because you don't necessarily have to do it all. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't have to be your wheel. A good video is a good video, and so being able to add that to your repertoire will definitely help inform what you need to create and do for next year.
Absolutely incredible. I just want to say another huge thank you to our presenters, to our audience members. I hope that this conversation felt really useful and like you were able to learn a lot. I know I learned a lot, which as someone who works with Screencastify every day is not always the case. Really quickly, before we jump out of here, Tony Rose, I wanted to pop this over to you. I know that there are some incredible summer opportunities for educators happening over at Modern Classroom Project that might benefit the folks in the room.
Yeah, so we're shifting, right, from summer learning with our students to summer learning for our teachers. And so Modern Classrooms Project really empowers educators to create a blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning environment. These are all terms that we know as teachers. We don't know how to implement them correctly or appropriately in our classrooms. And so this is kind of where we step in. And so if you go to the next slide, Olivia, it's just more information about our Virtual Summer Institute. It's actually starting next week, which is really exciting. But it's 5 weeks. You get to create lessons based off of what you're already doing. So our professional development is really geared towards your class, your content area, and how to really implement these 3 pillars into your classroom. And so we have suggested deadlines, we have lesson classifications of our must do, should do, aspire to do, very similar to what you would be creating for your student experience. So you get to really experience that as a teacher. And so if you are interested, we do have scholarships available for folks. This is about a $750 PD, but definitely check out our scholarships because we like to give scholarships away. I mean, I am, an educator. I like free stuff, so we're gonna continue giving away free stuff. So you don't have to pay for anything. So definitely sign up for the scholarship, the open opportunities. And then of course, the next slide has a QR code. So if you just wanna go ahead and grab that, your smartphone and take a look at that QR code, you're more than welcome to. But I appreciate you all being here. I just wanted to give you this opportunity. Free stuff. We love free stuff. We love free learning. And so hopefully you rest this summer. Hopefully you get, do something that brings you joy, honestly.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for prioritizing our students, ourselves, and each other as whole people and making sure that we're not kind of neck deep in work all summer, Tony Rose. This Modern Classroom Project is an incredible opportunity. They have been such incredible partners to us in helping teachers to think about what student-led learning and how video and other kind of tools can really help students to kind of take the driver's seat in their own education. So thank you guys again for coming. Thank you, George. Thank you, Tony Rose. I don't know how many times I could say thank you, but it still wouldn't be enough. Again, I hope you guys felt that today was useful and can't wait to see you next time. Bye, y'all.